Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Tech AI Solution podcast. Today we have our guest, Eric from YourPro. And how about let's go to the Eric and Eric, introduce yourself and tell us about yourself and your company.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, appreciate you having me on today. Um, a little bit about myself. Try not to ramble on too long here, but I'm originally from Michigan. I started out in the kind of construction space when I was in high school and kind of throughout college. I worked underneath my cousin-in-law, so we're doing home remodels, bathroom renovations, really anything to do with a home, top to bottom. So, it was a smaller business. I essentially, was like a sponge. I just tried to absorb as much as I could about, how he did marketing, how he treated employees. Fantastic boss to learn from and mentor. And from there, I recently, well, not recently, but I moved to Nashville, Tennessee in, I want to say it was 2014. Yep. Moved in 2014 into the city and just saw so much growth happening all around me. Nashville is one of those places where the economy is just booming. You'd see cranes in the city left and right, building new infrastructure. And I was like, man, I really want to get in on it. I knew I couldn't go and build a skyscraper, but I was like, there's got to be some shape or form I can get into the, property space and real estate space. So, what brought me down to Nashville was working for a Fortune 500 company, 9 to 5 job, and I was also moonlighting as well. And after my 9 to 5 job, I'd go over to a home that I purchased. My first home I purchased on a FHA loan. And
Mhm.
FHA, you have to live in the home for a year. So that's
Yeah.
exactly what I did. I lived in the home and was renovating it at the same time. So I took the home completely down to studs
Hmm.
and just started remodeling it. Kitchen, bathroom, everything. It was a big learning curve because, the confidence, right? I was
Yeah.
by myself, where previously I was always underneath someone. But remember one day sitting in the nice corporate office looking out the window, and there's these landscapers. It was like a 75-degree day. It was beautiful. Sun was shining. And I was looking out the window. I was like, man, I would pay someone here at this company to go out there and work with them for free. And it was kind of at that point, I was like, I really am someone that I like to do some, things with my hands. I like to be active. I kind of, not the person that you put in a box and say, hey, here's A, create B. I like to get, A, B, C, D and create whatever with it, right? So at that point, I really decided to make that leap and, go full time with the home flipping. So the
Hmm.
business started off as a home flipping business. First name for it, we've had many name changes, but
Okay.
first name was called the Nashville Flipper. I had a
Hmm.
little TV experience where we did a TV show on flipping homes in
Oh.
Nashville. And then from there, just being in the, real estate space, realtors, property management companies, I started getting calls, for people that, didn't have a plumber or the plumber wasn't showing up. And they say,
Mm.
hey, one of my homes, they have this issue. Do you think you could help me out? Because they'd see my videos and everything. They knew I was capable. And I'd be like, yeah, not a problem. It's on the house. Don't worry about it. I like doing this. It's fun. And next thing I know, more calls and more calls and more calls. And, I'm go and basically transition the company into a full-time, maintenance and remodeling company. And, from there, your pros, that business was, pretty much established. I brought on an investor July of last year. We've seen tons of growth since then. Our monthly revenue growth rate year over year is at 600%.
Oh.
And we're currently a finalist for a next award for Nashville for a startup category in real estate and construction. So we grew the team from was pretty much myself, and I had an admin, Kate, and we grew that in just less than a year to about 20 employees. So
Oh.
it's been a journey,
Yeah.
a fast
It's
one
a
too.
Yes, a fascinating and motivational journey. And congratulations on being uh nominated for award again.
Yeah, appreciate it.
And
Yeah.
you also look like a movie star. You said that you featured on the TV before, right?
Yeah, so I was it was kind of a competitor to, some of the other networks out
Mm,
there when it comes to home flipping shows. And it was a really great experience
yeah,
because it was when I started the show, I didn't even have a home under contract yet.
yeah,
So they let me know, I'm like, okay, I got to get a home under contract first. So I had to go out, find a home first, which that's the hardest part about real estate investing is, finding the right
yeah.
home. And through that journey, they got to see me from the very beginning to the very finished product. And I worked with a lot of, different brands in the, home renovation space, which was also a great
Yeah.
experience.
Tell us more about your pro company. Like, what does it do, and what are its like ideal customers and or client?
Yeah, so your pros business, I really found a niche area from being out there, in the field because I was a person who was, swinging the hammer.
Mm,
I was working directly with, lots of customers, clients, and what I noticed is there was a huge need for kind of a one-stop shop construction company. You have a lot of larger companies out there, and even, for them, they may be able to do, electrical work for you. But then when it
mm,
comes to the drywall, they're like, well, hey, sorry, we don't handle drywall. You're going to have to call someone else.
mm-hmm,
And when you have these, little steps and projects for one large project where you have to call, 3 to 4 different companies, now something that would take normally 2 days ends up taking a month or 2 months.
mm,
And especially with businesses, I was working with a lot of businesses and I could see this need where they're like, we just need one person that we can call for everything. And it would
mm,
make our lives so much easier. And, I've really found that area and said, hey, this is an area where, there's a very high demand and need for it. And I
mm-hmm,
really want to kind of capitalize on this market and expand into it. So that's the Your Pros brand. Our X factor is that, you give us a call and we can handle, anything you need. We have,
love that.
different specialties, HVAC, plumbing to drywall to, on staff hourly technicians for, really anything that, you may need repairs with, especially for businesses because they need, things done right away or else they're
Yeah.
not making money.
So you directly collaborate, like if someone came to you for their problem. So you have in-house HVAC specialist, or you just collaborate with different partners from the Nashville to work on that particular project or particular problem. So you have inbuilt technicians, or you just have a partners who do the job for you through that
Yeah.
app.
Yeah. So we kind of have a mix, I'd say. So we have
Okay.
in-house technicians who are hourly. And what that allows us to do is to be a lot more cost effective
Yeah.
and provide solutions and also be able to move quickly, right? So
Yeah.
if we have a call for like some kind of, water main leak in a restaurant, we can mobilize almost instantly to get someone
Mm,
over there. Where, some other companies, they may just use, a bunch of different vendors and they
yeah.
can't move that quickly. And then, of course, when it comes to larger projects, because we'll handle projects that could be $100,000, $200,000, and
Hmm.
that's where our specialist team comes into play, where we have licensed plumbers, electricians, HVAC, and what we do differently. I'd say another X factor to us is we have dedicated project managers. We call them external project managers.
Okay.
And what they do is they go out and they make sure the project runs smoothly start to finish. And they
Hmm.
communicate one-on-one directly with the customer. So when you have an issue that comes up and you're like, hey, I have a question about this or that, you have a direct point of contact that you can call at any
Okay.
time. Where, a lot of situations, what I was finding out with these businesses, especially some of the larger companies out there, is they'd be doing a 50,000 $100,000 project and they would have no idea who they're supposed to contact, like who's
Yeah.
actually leading this project, who's like
You,
handling the day to day.
you're solving the real problem, that's for sure.
Mhm.
And if we talk about the industry right now, like what particular shift that you're seeing in this industry, towards which point this industry is moving, what that would be, what would be the
Yeah,
shift?
there's huge growth. I heard once that construction is the next gold rush.
Hmm.
um, and you see it when you look at private equity companies. Private equity companies are buying up construction and maintenance service companies at the same, multiples as tech and healthcare.
Mm,
It is a growing industry. There is, a huge demand and there's little supply. Um, you know, Not a lot of people over the past 10, 20 years
mm-hmm,
have been going into the trades industry. And now you're starting to see this shift in the dynamic where now, you have, you know, young entrepreneurs going into, the trade schools where, they can find career paths where they're making over a six-figure salary. So that was one of the big motivators for me. I was coming from the financial services side
mm-hmm.
at a great company. And I was just seeing this shift in the dynamic. And I was like, construction and these, service type businesses is really where the industry is going. And that's why I wanted to get, behind it quickly before it was too late.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's I think that reflects that you have a visionary background and you move it very quickly towards the industry, the way it is moving. So, if I have to say, like, what is the one thing that is going right now, like completely going right way as you expected, and it's going the right way, what that would be, and what is one that is frustration for you in this industry? What are the
Nothing
two things?
goes the right way. And
Yeah,
that's the fun of it, right?
I think the growth, I think you mentioned the year-on-year revenue growth is 600%. I think that's where you are going in the right direction.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah, what would be
agree.
the frustration then?
Yeah, I mean, that is the pure joy of running and operating a business is, the things that don't go the right way. It's,
Mm,
a constant learning, it's a constant improvement. And, I take it back to, when I was in high school, working underneath my previous boss, and it's like you're always problem solving out in a field and when you're doing construction. And it's the
yeah.
same thing when you're an owner and operator of a business, every day someone's coming to you with problems. And, when the problems get to you, that
Mm,
means they're the biggest problems, right? No one else could handle them
yeah.
until they got up to you. So, I mean, that brings me the joy. That brings me the excitement. Every day is a new day. And it's, thinking in that bigger picture of how do we, fix this issue. To answer your question, as far as things going right,
Mm-hmm,
I'm a big believer in systems and technology. I
mm-hmm.
think construction is one of those areas that has been underserved for
Yeah.
quite some time, especially when we look at the commercial side of things when it relates to businesses. So, that has been a big focus for us is bringing that innovation and technology into the construction space. And I think we're doing a great job with it. As far as, things that have been difficult, that we struggle with, I mean, it really, in the early stages, when you have that much growth, you have to kind of keep pace with that growth, right? Especially when you're starting off and you're, just creating a business. I'm at 20 employees now, but it was, simply a few months ago that we're hiring our fifth and sixth employee.
Mm-hmm.
And you learn a lot when you're hiring
Yeah.
people and just understanding of, hey, how do we make sure we're building the right team? And how do
Mm-hmm.
we make sure we're building the right culture around our organization? And it all starts and ends with people. So, earlier on, I, didn't really understand that concept until, you start to get five,
Yeah.
6, 7, 8, and you realize, hey, our business has its own personality. It's called
Yeah.
culture. And, do we want a culture here that, reflects who we are as a business? We care about people. We want to show we're professional. We communicate. So those are the people now when we're out and, looking to bring people onto, our team is, finding people that align with our core values
Yeah.
and, want to be a part of the same journey that we all want to get to.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks for the answer. And I think you rightly mentioned about the good points that are moving in the industry and the pain points. So, if I have to talk about one particular metric that is one particular metric that you want to improve in your business or industry, I would say business. So, what that metric would be if you want to improve that one, whether it's
Mhm.
a like customer input, so proper customer input, predictable maintenance, whatever the metrics, what that would be. What
Mhm.
which thing you want to improve in in your business right now?
It's a good question because there's many,
Yeah, you can
many
talk about
metrics.
many actually.
There's always room for improvement.
Yeah,
Um, I think I'd have to boil it down to, numbers. And I know that's very broad, but
yeah,
I think a common misconception when, someone's starting a business, we're often working in our business, not on our business. And
mhm,
it's the hardest thing for new entrepreneurs when you're starting off and really understanding, hey, how am I going to scale this business? How am I going to grow it? And
yeah,
what it really boils down to is, the numbers, specifically when we're looking at, like a profit margin of
yeah,
your business, like what am I actually selling and how much am I going to make on that?
yeah,
And what are my costs associated with selling this? And like if I had to go back to square one, and I was, hey, I got this great idea and I'm going to start this business. I would lock myself in a room for a month
hmm,
and I would just go over all these different numbers of, hey, what price am I going to sell this at? How am
yeah,
I going to pay, the people to help drive this for me? What's my profit margin? What am I left with afterwards? And then I would build systems around that to automatically track that information because it's great to have it on paper, but
yeah,
it's another thing to actually see that live data as you're growing and be able to have maybe different levers that you can pull and say, hey, what happens if, we were able to add 3 sales employees that could help drive, my product or my service?
yeah,
What does that look like now? And I can, put that in as one of those levers and see, okay, this would be the result. Now I know what I'm looking at. So, for me, it's not a specific like KPI or statistic.
hmm,
It's more so I would love to improve just our visibility when it comes to our financials and our numbers to
hmm,
have that clear picture, going forward of what if we do this, what if we do that? Because that is really the overall, telling sign of a business. Warren Buffett always would say,
hmm,
hey, I'm not looking at buying stocks on the price tag. I'm going into the financial statements. I'm looking at the income and loss statements and the cash flow and the balance sheet because
yeah.
that's going to tell me the real story. And I didn't realize that until I was, a good year into, the business. And I said, oh my gosh, all these numbers that, I'd look at before, that's starting to make
Mhm.
sense. And I can really tell the whole picture and story just by looking at these numbers. So that's my long-winded answers. It's the numbers.
No, no. So you want to improve the numbers, like what exact? So you want to reduce your cost input so that you can have a margin with the profit. That's what you're trying to say?
Yeah, and it's not necessarily that. I think it's the data analytics, the tracking of
Okay.
those numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, hey, what is our expenses down to the nuts and bolts that,
Oh, yeah.
we are using for a job? And a lot of that stuff, like, you think about it, you're like, oh yeah, we'll be able to track that. It's easy. And then you start growing and you add more
Yeah.
people, and then you're like, oh my gosh, this is actually really complicated to, track. And
Yeah.
developing the systems around that too, where you have these accurate numbers, where you're not having to go and look through your bank account statement and say, hey, how
Yeah.
much did we spend here? How much did we spend there? Because you won't have time for that when you're growing.
Exactly. So if I go to back to your app, I think do you have app your Pro or OneTap? Exactly what was that?
So, yep. So with the technology portion and,
Mm-hmm.
how we're really, driving home on that is we create an app called OneTap. So it's actually
Mm-hmm.
a separate business from YourPros.
Okay.
And, what it is we're integrating AI and innovation into the maintenance request field. So think
Yeah.
of it kind of like an Uber type model
Yeah.
for business repairs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I got the idea because I was out on a job and I had to go to, I got a call from, a random number.
Okay.
And they're like, hey, we got this, big store location that has a
Yeah.
crack in their floor and we want you to go over there and fix it. What's your price? Told them my price.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. So I head out there. I go to, big supply store, pick up a tube of crack filler, and
Mm-hmm.
walk into the store. And right when I walk in, I get these weird looks from like the managers and employees, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, well, what's going on here? Like, that's all you brought? And I was like, yeah. They're like, well, let me take you over to the crack. I'm like, okay. I walk over there, and this thing is 500 feet, one end of the store to the other
Oh
end.
my God.
It
This is
is
not a crack.
three, yeah, it's 3, 4 inches wide, and there's hair ties in it. And this is a shoe store, by the way. So
Oh, okay.
there's little kids
Mm.
running, testing out their shoes over this crack. I'm sitting there, I'm
Oh
like,
my God.
okay, first off, this is going to be, a change work order because I was not expecting this kind of a
Yeah.
job. I thought I was going to be in and out in 5 minutes. So unfortunately, I got a busy schedule. I'm gonna have to come back next week. But my second question is, why has this been here for so long? And
Mm-hmm.
the manager there at the time, she was actually filling in, and she said, well, the manager here previously, they just never filled out a maintenance request form. So of course I got to ask, well, how do you fill out a maintenance request form?
Yeah.
And she says, well, you have to log into our, back end system, and you print off this form and
Mm-hmm.
you fill it out, and then you have to fax it over to corporate. Corporate gets it. They send it to their third party contracting company overseas. Then they will
Oh,
hop on a phone and just Google, different vendors near us, and they call you, and now you're here. And I was
oh,
like, holy smokes. I'm like, and how long does that take? Like, well, if it's a really bad emergency, maybe 2 weeks. If it's
oh,
not that much of an emergency, I'm
oh my
like,
God.
holy smokes, this is a problem. And what that is, I always compare it to that game of telephone, right? Where you
Mm.
whisper something, one person's
Yeah.
ear, they go all the way down.
It takes time.
Yeah, it's a giant game of telephone. So by the time it got to me, it's like cracking floor. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
there's a small crack, And what I figured out, that kept happening again and again and again. And I said,
Yeah.
there's got to be a way to connect the technician, the person that's going to do the work, to that manager. Because what I would do is I'd just pick up the phone and I'd get those requests that came in, and I'd say, hey, I'm calling because I got this request. I want to
Mm.
make sure this is the actual request, what's actually going on. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
why can't we just connect these two people together? And I had a business coach too at the time. So this was kind of in the back of my mind. And what they always said is, hey, it's really hard to sell one to one. And that's the
Yeah.
construction industry, right? You got one client, you got one person, one to one. Said what you want to do is create a business that sells one to many.
Yeah.
And the best way to do that is through technology. So I
Exactly.
had that in the back of my head. And, at the time, I'm like, well, maybe there's a way through technology. Like if we could have a that's easy button that someone just, hits at a store, and all of a sudden there's maintenance there to repair your problem. Well, everyone's got a phone, right? So we essentially developed a way, it's a scannable request tag is what it's called. And there's a QR code on the request tag. In our, Batten, you can have RFID, all sorts of any kind of scannable device.
Yeah.
But what it does is when you scan it, it goes to a database, and we get a data dump of all the information. So where the location is, store hours, model and serial numbers of appliances. So think restaurants, prep fridges that go down, um, you know, microwaves, anything really. We can have 95% of that maintenance form
Mm-hmm.
in half a second.
Oh yeah.
The only thing we're missing, that last 5%, is what's wrong. So what happens if, like, I'm a manager and I go up and scan that request tag, instantly I'm opened up into a chat room where I'm talking with a live fix specialist that says,
Oh,
hey, how can I help you? How can I help mitigate this issue with you? What we're working on right now with the OneTap app is working AI into
yeah.
it. So now you
Okay.
have instant triaging, and we're able to also, with AI, since we have the zip code of that
Yeah.
location, we can essentially build an estimate in less than 15 seconds
Okay.
and send that over for approval. And
Mm-hmm.
then when I said it, we're like Uber because we're a
Yeah.
matchmaking platform as well. Then we have the ability to match make a qualified one tap technician to
Okay.
you. So we take this time frame of 3, 4 weeks, right? And
Mm.
we're basically bringing it down to minutes.
Minutes.
And
Yeah.
that's the goal, and that's the fun part.
That's a
Is yeah.
fantastic. That's a fantastic you're solving the real problem people are facing, and whether it's in the home and service industry or the people
Hmm.
in the like franchisee and all, you're talking, you're definitely solving a real problem, and I really like what you're doing. So
Hmm.
that's all for today's podcast. I think we discovered everything about your company, about the industry, about your views. I think you have
Yeah.
covered everything. Thanks for being on the podcast today.
Well, appreciate you having me on. It's been a blast.
No
Thank
worries.
you.
Thank you.